everybody. Welcome to ABA Inside Track, the podcast that's like reading in your car, but safer. I'm your host, Robert Perry Cruz, and with me as always are my fabulous co-hosts.
Hello, hello, hello. It's Diana.
And it's Miss Jackie McDonald.
Hi, everybody. How you doing?
Interesting choice.
Thank you.
Boy.
We're great.
We're
great.
so
Yeah.
good.
So great.
Good.
So good.
I don't know about you, but I just got back from St. Louis.
Me
and boy,
too.
am I tired. Hey. So I was
Hey.
carrying a lot of bags and recording
I know, you
equipment.
kind of,
Hey, guys.
I blew the joke.
that one was perfect.
Sorry. Hey.
How do birds learn how to fly?
I don't know. How?
They just wing it.
Oh.
Learn that from my 2.5-year-old.
That's good. That is a good joke.
I was going
Thanks.
to say their mother pushes them out of the nest.
Yeah, that's actually true.
So what you are about to hear is one of our one of the coolest things I think we've
Comedic
gotten.
gold.
One of the coolest things I think we've gotten to do since starting the show, which is a live recording of the podcast. We are invited for a second year to the Thompson Center for Autism's conference out in St. Louis, Missouri. We were very, very excited to be out there, and we were able to present on the topic of parent stress and parent training, which was fun.
You'll hear all about it.
You'll hear all the I shouldn't rehash the jokes we do. So you're going to get to hear that show. But since it was a talk, we don't say what articles we specifically are discussing. So in the interest of keeping true to our typical format, why don't we tell you what articles are discussed in the presentation you are about to hear?
Cool.
They are Helping Parents Understand Applied Behavior Analysis, Creating a Parent Guide in 10 Steps by Helton and Albermorgan from Behavior Analysis and Practice 2018. The Problem of Parental Non-Adherence in Clinical Behavior Analysis, Effective Treatment is Not Enough by Allen and Warzak from the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis 2000. Parental Inclusion in Early Intensive Behavioral Intervention, The Influence of Parental Stress, Parent Treatment Fidelity, and Parent-Mediated Generalization of Behavior Targets on Child Outcomes by Strauss, Vicari, Valeri, DElia, Arima, and Fava from Research in Developmental Disabilities 2012. And Compassionate Care in Behavior Analytic Treatment, Can Outcomes Be Enhanced by Attending to Relationships with Caregivers? By Taylor, LeBlanc, and Nozick from Behavior Analysis in Practice 2018. 2018. All right. So that is our preamble, which is pretty short because we're going to get right into our talk. And for those second year graduate students from Mizzou who came over and reminded me I failed to do the fun catchphrase, why don't we get started with a great hey, everybody?
All right, well, it is my pleasure to introduce our next speakers. They make up the fabulous team of ABA Inside Track, who I'm sure most of you have heard of. We have Dr. Jackie McDonald.
That's me.
Dr. Diana Perry Cruz.
Hello, that's me.
And Robert Perry Cruz.
I'm not a doctor.
And like I said, they're the incredible trio at ABA Inside Track. ABA Inside Track is, of course, a podcast about applied behavior analysis and the research that fuels the field. ABA Inside Track is a spirited discussion between two BCADs, and of course their BCBA moves. And they're a source of also continuing education credits for all of us. And so if you haven't subscribed to their podcast, make sure you do that before you leave today. And please welcome ABA Inside Track.
Thank you. All right. Hi, everybody. As Courtney said, we're ABA Inside Track. We already did our introductions. Sorry, I'm going to overgeneralize my introduction to our normal podcast. So we're here today to talk to you about, Dinah, it was your title, so why don't you tell the title?
So the title that is on the original QR code was like our title when we planned this. We're like, we'll be very serious, very official. It'll be about parent stress and child outcome and everything. And then as we kind of got into it,
We got stressed.
the way everything like fell out, it was like, oh, this isn't actually how we thought this topic was going to go at all. So we had to modify our title a little bit. So now it's parent stress, parent training, and parent training stress, or the stressors related to parent training, because it turns out this is like a whole different ballgame than what we initially thought. So it's a little bit of a funny title, but it's not a funny topic. We're going to talk, seriously about some serious issues, and I hope you enjoy.
Yes. So if you have not heard of our show before, we decided we wanted to kind of keep the format that we usually go in, which is different than the typical talk that you might go to where someone stands up and they go over their slides. Ours is meant to be more of a discussion. So while there will be some kind of like lecture chunks, don't be surprised if we cut each other off and say different things and maybe go off on like just a few small tangents, but we're going to try to be cognizant of time. So if you've never been in a talk like that, I hope you enjoy it. And if you don't like that, I believe we were told you can just quietly go outside and close the door softly, and no harm, no foul. All right.
We've actually never had slides. So this is our first time that we've ever actually had slides.
Oh, yes, that's going to be new.
Well, you guys are in for a treat.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get started talking
Okay.
about parent stress.
Great. So I'm going to start us off with a little bit of background related to parent stress. And again, sort of the genesis for this topic for us was, let's talk about how behavior analytic research can support parent training and how that training most definitely reduces parent stress, right? Like that was like our initial thesis. And we'll talk to you about how that has sort of morphed over time. But some of the main points that we came into this conversation with are definitely supported in the literature and are kind of basic assumptions that we all probably came into this talk with and can also leave with, and that is okay. The first one, being a parent is stressful.
Amen.
Right.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right.
We all can agree
Who
on
said
that.
no?
No
My
matter
child's
what,
a
being a parent is
joy.
stressful. There's a lot of considerations to be made. There are a lot of resources that need to be invested in a variety of ways. Now, the other thing that research does also support is that being a parent of a child with a developmental disability is more stressful than even just regular parenting, right? And when we talk about stress, first of all, we are almost always going to be talking about this with reference to self-report, right? Because stress is one of those tricky things to measure. In a really cool scenario, maybe we would have some type of physiological measurement of stress, right? But those studies aren't kicking around that much. So for the most part, it's research who have asked parents, how do you feel in this scenario? Do you feel stressed? And in what ways? And then they use that self-report as their dependent variable. So we're starting from that place, just so you guys are aware, I guess, of what we mean by parent stress. Okay. So then this Hastings.
Sorry, we didn't cue out how we'd switch the slides.
Okay. Do you need a special signal?
No,
or?
just you can just
okay, all right.
point.
Just a jab?
Spiritedly,
A
that'd
hard
be fine.
jab? Okay. So Hastings 2002 made this nice little quick infographic for us to look at. I guess it's called Figure 1. Just to talk about the interrelation between child behavior problems, parent stress, and then parent behavior as well. Because we should never assume that these things are operating in vacuum, right? So you have, perhaps you have a child with more challenging behavior or more learning differences. It's likely that then the parent's response to that behavior is going to be modified based on the challenging behavior that they see. And those can go hand in hand, right? So like we said at the start, parenting is hard. It would be great for all of us if there was like a parenting class that came with the new baby, but we don't really do that in our country. We just say, they're beautiful, good luck, and you're on your merry way. Now, if any parent could use training, then certainly if you are working with a child who maybe is presenting with more difficulties or challenges or delays, then most certainly those parents would also benefit from training as well. Excuse me. So coming into a scenario and saying parent behavior or child behavior are interrelated, right, is not saying that parents of children with disabilities are doing a bad job. And we never want that to be the takeaway point from this talk either. It's saying that there are additional challenges that parents may benefit from having additional training to help address. And if we don't get that additional training, then we could potentially see this escalation of these two factors in conjunction, and along for the ride on that is increases in parental stress as well.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. So the point I just made has been reiterated by some other folks as well, that it does seem that parent stress and child behavior can be interrelated. You can see increases of both of those as they impact one another. And then the other point that I said at the beginning too is that we want to determine how can we, from a behavior analytic perspective, assist in incorporating parents into what we do. So ABA or EIBI has been shown to be an effective treatment for young children with autism. So it sort of goes hand in hand that we would say, well, of course we want to then train parents on what we do as behavior analysts so that they can be incorporated into that, they can be a part of the treatment and part of the intervention when we're not there. So it makes sense that you'd say, we want parents to be involved, ABA works, right? So we'll teach parents how to do ABA, and then that will make the whole thing better, including the parent stress. That was the thesis that I, at least, went into this thinking I was going to find.
I was thinking that we were giving more resources, so those resources would alleviate parent stress, right? Because a lot of the times when you're parenting, it does feel like you're parenting in a vacuum because you don't have those outside supports to help you with any sort of behavior problems that come along, even in typical child development.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
So I was hoping.
Okay. However, that's your cue. There isn't as much research as I thought, in fact, to tie these two things together. So I was expecting to see, like, oh yeah, we trained parents in how to do this, that, or the other, and we saw concomitant decreases in parent stress. I'm so glad I got to say that word. However, there's not that much floating around out there with regard to that. So this Ingersoll study, they said, well, parents did find the training helpful, right? So there was a little bit of social validity measured there, but it wasn't looking specifically at stress. So the relationship between these two things has been a little bit understudied, at least from my perspective.
You can do it too.
It's okay. It's cool. So from what I found, there have been a few studies that have looked at this question, right? Asking parents what has helped you the most to alleviate stress as parents of children with developmental disabilities. And they found that cognitive behavioral therapy, so CBT, was helpful, reducing parent stress. And then, I mean, gosh, getting extra help, right? Like babysitting or respite care helps to reduce parent stress. That is totally fair, right? Everyone needs a break. But that doesn't tell us much about how we might assist in training parents to hopefully take some of that burden off of them through best practice. Singer and colleagues did a meta-analysis thus far of what we know about parent stress. And parents reported that there was less stress when CBT was a component, but there were a lot of different components. So cognitive behavioral therapy did seem to assist, but that study didn't tease apart all the different variables that could have been present there. And then the last bullet point on that slide is kind of a clue in, I think, and it was like hidden in this Singer article a little bit. But it said parent training should not be thought to produce higher parent stress. So they did a big meta-analysis and said, okay, our bottom line is we don't think that this causes increased stress. And I was like, oh, like, did that need to be stated, right? This is a very interesting can of worms that I have suddenly found myself in.
Very true.
Yes, and then we found the article that Jackie's going to talk about next.
Yeah. Cue slide. So this article that I'm going to review for you lays out what we already know, right? So we know that there are a lot of variables that may impact the effectiveness of EIBI. So we know EIBI works, we know that it can improve symptoms, but you see varying improvements across participants, across kids. And so some research suggests that if a participant is younger, they may benefit more from EIBI for longer term exposure. If they come into the program with more adaptive behavior, research suggests that they're going to get more out of EIBI. And one research suggested that high parental fidelity and implementation of treatment could also affect the appropriate or the satisfaction of EIBI performance. And the specific article that I'm going to talk about looked at whether parent involvement in actual treatment related to the child outcomes. So would this be more stressful for the parent if they were required to be part of the treatment? And so the answer is yes, no, maybe. Spoiler.
My favorite answer.
I know.
It depends.
So one of the research that helped, I guess, mold this Strauss and colleagues 2012 article was that other research suggests that lower intensity treatment correlated with lower parent stress. So high intensity treatment, so more treatment, more trying to target challenging behaviors and that sort, correlated with higher parent stress. And so Strauss and colleagues wanted to really look at basically the whole thing, like what's going on here. is EIBI really more effective than an eclectic group? If parents engage in treatment with very supervised parent training, supervised criteria, will you see better parent fidelity, better acquisition and maintenance of skills with those students in that EIBI group? And they looked at pre-6 month and post-6 months. And then they wanted to look at if there was a change in parent distress. So they looked at across 3 domains. They looked at a total parent stress score, and this was done by inventory, so just a questionnaire. They also looked at how parents felt their interaction with their child, or how good it was, so it could be ranged from like excellent to dysfunctional, and then how they perceived their child as difficult, more difficult, or easy. So these are the things that they looked at.
There's no like neutral.
There wasn't, I mean, there might have been.
Difficult in the middle.
All children are difficult.
Oh, man.
Just kidding. But yeah, so they're not really, but sometimes they are. Yeah, so what they wanted to look at is in this specific EIBI group, would you see if after very structured supervised training and support and supervision and very structured curriculum development, would you see less parent stress? And then they looked at how are all of these variables tied together.
Okay.
So they recruited 44 children diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, and the 44 children were divided into the 2 groups. So one group was the eclectic group, which still included behavior analysis, so included DTT, may include speech, may include OT. So they didn't really specify what was happening here. So they did specify there was less supervision, less support, and no parent training in that eclectic group. And then they had a separate group that was the EIBI group. And here, parents elected to participate in this group, right? So that's important to note that these parents said, I want parent training. Whereas the eclectic group said, I do not want to be a part of parent training. And so the EIBI group, over 6 months, had 1 week at the center where they received 25 hours of staff EIBI trained, very structured curriculum, and 10 hours at home with the parent. And then 3 weeks of in-home intensive parent training, where they had like 15 hours a week of parent training, which is like a lot of parent training. Like you're basically quitting your job.
That's some gung-ho training right there.
And so after that very intense parent training, it gradually faded, but there was still weekly supervision and support for the parent, and the parent was included in the process in choosing goals and objectives and targeting skills to decrease. So the eclectic group only received 12 hours a week of ABA, and then the rest of the hours were filled with other eclectic type therapies. Yeah. So at the edge of your seat, I know you're wondering, it's no surprise that performance was better in the EIBI group than the eclectic group. We know this. There was a decrease in autism symptom severity as diagnosed by a psychologist. They found that early language comprehension increased better for EIBI groups than the eclectic group. Functional communication increase and daily living skills also increased more compared to the eclectic group. But both groups made gains in early language word comprehension and adaptive behavior functioning. So it wasn't that the eclectic group didn't do well on anything, they just didn't do as good as the EIBI group. And this is after 6 months. So then, I know because this is about parent training and parent distress, you're all wondering what happened here. So at the onset, there wasn't a difference between total score of stress, like overall stress, across both of the groups at the start. However, when the authors kind of teased apart where parents felt stressed, in the EIBI group, they felt more parental distress about relationships with their child, and the eclectic group felt more stress about the perception of them having a more difficult child. But then after 6 months, the eclectic group total stress score decreased dramatically, and that is in line with what previous research had suggested, right? Because if they weren't actively involved in the treatment, their perception may be less of a difficult child because they weren't actively involved. But surprisingly for us, when I read this, I was like, oh my gosh. Just like sweating a little bit when I got to the results section. There was a higher perception of a difficult child during the EIBI group, and a higher total distress score for parents after that 6 months. So that's kind of stressful for us, right? That we are providing a lot of training for parents, and they're more stressed after 6 months of hanging out with us than they were at the beginning. Like, what are we doing wrong? And so here's some caveats that the author suggested. One thing coming in, parents were really excited about parent training, and they may have set very difficult goals for their children, which they really were excited and stressed to participate in. And what they found is after that 6-month mark, they had more realistic goals, and the targets were more easy to master than these overarching big goals. And so staff may have been contributing to this overall parent stress because they were like, okay, if you want to do this, we'll do it. And it may not have been beneficial for the child. But what we did find is that even though it was more stressful, the authors posited that if they had kept going, which they probably should have, if you have that question, we should keep going, you should just keep going.
They might have thought of the question after they were already done writing the whole report.
But they should just keep going. Is that maybe over time, right, when they have picked these more realistic goals, that parent training should decrease stress, because they did see an increase in child-parent interaction. So that actually decreased on the stress level, which is nice, right? You don't want to be stressed around your kid. You want to feel like you have a good relationship with them. And then we did see better child outcomes with the EIBA parent-mediated group, both at the acquisition of skills, decrease in challenging behavior, as well as maintenance of skills. And parents reported that they were very satisfied that their child displayed less challenging behavior at home, which made their house life more satisfying. But, we don't know what happened long term. So the authors kind of leave us with this, like, it's stressful, but it might be worth it. So parent training promotes this lasting behavior change, both at school and then it moves to the home. So over time, the authors posited that it's possible that parent training would lead to lower stress. And the eclectic group we see higher stress over time because they're not seeing marked improvement in the home. You go.
Okay. What?
You went through that one?
Okay. No, I'm good.
Yep.
Sorry. So, that was good, Jackie.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Guys, I did it. Thank you, right? Thank you. Thank you.
Who's the tone applaud for that?
All right. So we still haven't really answered this question, right? Is parent training helpful at reducing parent stress? It seems like that really may depend. And I really like the point that you made there at the end, Jackie, which was maybe parent training is stressful, but is it going to be worth it in the long term?
Yeah.
Right? We have seen such beneficial impact of going through the process of receiving EIBI and ABA training for the children. So it makes sense that we would want to bring parents along, of course, in that process. But just because we say, like, well, parent training is good and then we should be doing it, even if it's tough for parents, that may be a little bit of a limited view of what parent training really could be or should be. So once we reached this point in the conversation, as far as our research goes, we said, well, now we need to flip what we're talking about, right? Like, now I think we need to start to think about how we're doing parent training as behavior analysts, how we're incorporating parents into what we do as behavior analysts, and are there methods that have been supported through research, or at least thought about by smart people, that we can include in our parent training plans moving forward, so that ideally, and this research hasn't been done yet, ideally, right, seriously, ideally these could be helpful at reducing parent stress, given what we sort of surmise might be some of the challenges based on the Strauss article. So we're going to talk about 3 different pieces from varying places in behavior analytic literature and kind of bring them together underneath the topic of parent training, and discuss how consideration of these may be beneficial for parents when we're asking them to participate in parent training with us. So those 3 factors are, let's talk about how we can break training down into manageable steps for parents so that it's not an overwhelming process. We're not coming at them with a lot of jargon, like a walking glossary that's off-putting. Rob's going to talk about that.
Nobody likes that.
Right? And
There's actually research to support that nobody likes that.
That's true.
Yeah, there is. Excuse me. And then we're going to talk about this article, which is an awesome, awesome article, the Allen and Warzak 2000 article, which I truly love, but I don't particularly love the title of it, which is Parental Non-Adherence to Treatment. I apologize to Allen and Warzak. I do love the article, but it just sounds like so harsh, right? But the meat of that article is fantastic. So it gets into what, let's say we as a BCBA are saying, you need to do this treatment at home. And the parent comes back to you and says, I couldn't do that treatment at home, right? Like, it's not then our job to go back and say, well, you need to do that treatment at home because I'm your BCBA and I'm telling you that that's the best thing for your child, right? No, like, we need to step back and say, what are all the other considerations that are going on for this parent, and why was this not easy for them, and why was it something that was too big of an ask right now, right? So breaking down those variables so we can actually be assistive. And then I'm going to talk about another article which I truly, truly love, which is the Taylor, LeBlanc, and Nozick article, which reviews the state of compassionate care within our field currently.
Hey everyone, it's Rob. I'm just pausing the recording because I want to make sure that you all get to hear the fun news. ABA Inside Track is ACE approved. By listening to the show, you are able to earn one continuing education credit. Just listen to the episode and then go to the website, abainsidetrack.com/get-CEUs, and put in 2 secret code words for this episode. I'm going to give you the first one right now. Oh, and fun fact, if you're interested in CEs from ABA Inside Track, this episode CE is completely free.
Wow, wow, wow.
Yes. As a thank you to everybody, we want to give out 1 free CE for listening to our episode. However, you do still need the 2 secret code words because you still have to listen. It's not like we're just going to send it to you. You got to listen to the episode. The first one is ravioli. 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 Manja.
One of our favorite eats.
Yes.
At the Thompson Center.
It is a great eat. And while I have you sitting there listening to code words, why don't we take a little break, get a stretch, and then we'll be right back.
Do you want to be a BCBA?
Sure, we all do.
Now you can come to Regis College in Weston, Mass. to get your graduate degree.
Choose from any one of these courses.
Masters of Science in Applied Behavior Analysis.
Masters of Science in Special Education.
Dual degree in Special Ed and ABA.
Or be eligible for your postmaster's certificate.
You can complete your degree and be ready to sit for the exam in 2 years. And our 2017 grads had a 100% pass rate on the BACB exam.
Come enjoy practicum placement support, ethics mini handbooks, PhD-level professors, small class sizes, and a service trip to Iceland.
If interested, don't delay. Supplies are limited. Learn more at regiscollege.edu.
Again, that's www.regiscollege.edu, regiscollege.edu. One more time, www.regiscollege.edu. See you there!
And we are back talking about parent training and parent stress live at the Thompson Center for Autism's Annual Conference. Let's go right back to that presentation. Here we go.
Take it away, Rob.
Oh, thank you. Okay. So, when looking at the ideas that Diana was talking about in terms of helping parents manage stress by improving training capacity, we talked about, the Allen and Warzak article, which is, again, one of those great articles that, you get two people, they get together, they write this great paper on here's some awesome ideas. caveat, we didn't test out all these ideas. They were based on other research, so use with caution these ideas. They all sound great in terms of behavioral terminology, but this isn't a research article saying, here are the things we did and here are the changes we saw. So just kind of a warning there. Two terms that we're going to be talking about. One is going to be treatment integrity. And we all know what treatment integrity is. For all of us, most of you are going to be BCBAs, which means you work with RBTs or other behavior specialist type staff. And you talk all the time about treatment integrity, which is, are we precisely delivering the behavioral treatment that we have decided is needed to improve some sort of a target behavior? What we'll be mostly talking about in terms of working with parents is going to be that adherence piece. Now, like Diana was saying, this article and our whole discussion is not meant to sit here and berate parents who cannot do a good job. Why can't they do better at following their plans? Because that wouldn't be fair. That's not appropriate. They're dealing with a lot of other stressors and a lot of challenges. Every organism is doing the best they can at any given time. And there are a lot of things that we as support in their lives can do to overcome some of those barriers to improve the treatment adherence portion of our plans.
Yeah, and parents are part of our clients.
Exactly, they're part of the clients.
So if we're asking something that's too hard, then we need to step back and figure out what's better.
Exactly.
For our clients.
So when we talk about treatment adherence, what that term refers to is the extent to which parent behavior will line up with the recommendations of the clinician. So in most cases we're talking about here, that would be the BCBA. So the more you say do this, and then the parent does that, the higher the parental adherence. All right. Now, there are, of course, going to be some barriers in any family. I'm sure we've all worked with a number of different families that we're not going to be able to overcome by ourselves. So certainly if parents themselves have a cognitive impairment, or if they have restricted economic resources, if perhaps they are in social isolation, so maybe it's a single parent with no extended family, no partner to help out with, these aren't areas that we probably will be able to directly impact. However, there are lots of services, and parents sometimes do appreciate having access to, say, mental health agencies, other social services, community support. So those certainly could work into the equation. But most of what we'll be talking about are things that we can directly do in working with clients to improve this adherence.
And if you think back, the stuff that I had said CBT and respite, right?
Yeah.
So both of those would be ways that you might refer a family to, receive some type of counseling or find some babysitting help.
I love the babysitting.
Do you know a good babysitter as a BCBA? I don't know. So the 4 areas of possible improvement have to do in the areas of establishing operations, stimulus generalization, response acquisition, and consequent events. These are not new terms to any of you, but we're going to go into specifically how they might impact adherence with parents. So let's start with the impact of establishing operations. Now, when you're looking to start your treatment with a family, let's assume that you've done an amazing job with your functional analysis, you have a function-based treatment, so you know this plan is totally gonna work. It's gonna be great. Tons of target acquisition, decrease in challenging behavior. You're very excited about the whole thing.
Nailed it.
Maybe you even had RBTs run it in, say, like a clinic setting, or run it without the parent involved, and you've seen those reductions in problem behavior. You've seen those increases. So let's just assume you've done a perfect job as a BCBA in terms of your treatment planning. That's not what's going to be an issue here. Now we need to start transferring those skills to the parent. Now, one of the things that could happen in these cases is, well, let's think about why a parent might not be able to adhere to treatment quite as effectively as we would like, and as they would like as well. So most parents, when they have a challenge with their child, just like any of us who are parents, usually it's something probably medical or something seems wrong, we'll go to a doctor. What happens when we go to a doctor? They're going to do one of two things most of the time. They're going to either say, ooh, some rest and more fluids and they will be better in a few days, or if it's, say, an infection, they will give you an antibiotic. What happens to the child? Well, they're back to normal in just a few days. So it could be possible that parents have the learning history in which when I went to a professional to help me with something going on with my child, they immediately did something for me or gave me advice, and in a very short amount of time, everything worked out perfectly, just like I wanted to. Show of hands, when you have been implementing a behavioral treatment plan, how often have you been able to, in about a day or two, make 100% improvement in whatever it is that you have been hired to assist with?
Can't wait.
How many we got? Nobody? Really? Come on. No, of course, because behavior change is not that rapid.
I was waiting for that person.
I know, I knew there was going to be one person in the back. I've had some successes. So one of the problems that parents might run into is when they come to us. We're the specialists. We're similar to doctors or medical care professionals. When we start talking about here's the treatment we're going to implement, there's an expectation just from learning history of you are going to change my child's behavior in all the ways I want, and it's going to happen really fast. When it doesn't happen really fast, it's possible that our push to parents to adhere to our treatment actually it serves as a punisher. Do this thing more. Well, it's not doing what I expected to do. I thought this was going to be a lot faster.
And easier.
And easier. Always, yeah. It's always be nice to be easier. So, is it possible that when we set out to do treatment, we failed to explain to the families that this isn't going to be fast and that we need to find better reinforcers for the parent? Because everything you don't want your child to do is going to go away, and everything you want them to do is going to happen as much as you think it should happen is not a 2-day process. It could take a lifetime in many cases. So we need to come up with more intermediate outcomes as reinforcement. Could we set up intermediate goals as reinforcers, for example? So, hey, I know that your child's tantruming a lot more than they were yesterday, but that is a great sign because it means we're hitting that extinction burst, and once we get over that, it's going to be great. Don't worry about it. So something like that, as a possible example. Or could we start talking about the steps and maybe looking at some behavioral cusps in our treatment? Once they learn this skill, it's going to lead to so much growth. So all we need to do is get to that one skill, that basic communicative response, just occurring a few times a day. That's going to be what we set our sights on to start. Because if parents can see those successes, just like all of us, we want to see success quickly. So are there ways that we can set those situations up? Or not even set them up, but just work with parents to identify that they are occurring. There's also the issue that we're going to run into is a lot of times we don't always do our best at establishing competing social approval as a reinforcer. Now, all of us, especially those of us with children, we talk the most about the things that our kids have done. Oh, they were on the soccer team. Oh, they were in the school play. Oh, they were helpful with their grandparents at the grocery store. We talk about the things our children do, and then we're very excited about that. But then think about when you go out maybe with your partner out to dinner, and you have a family with 5 children next to you. What would be the most impressive thing that all of those children could do? Not do anything. Just sit there quietly and let you enjoy your peace
and eat
in silence and say, maybe they say excuse me if they burp, but maybe they just say nothing. As a society, when we think about what we expect of children, we really do value children being kind of quiet and not disturbing what we're doing. Unless they're our own kids, in which case it's really exciting when they're doing all these great things. So, as a society, anytime we see parents engaging in any behavior that isn't resulting in that immediate silence that we're expecting, we are probably sending out, some kind of negative signals to them. So we're serving, our responses is going to punish that adherence. So you have a parent, say, who is practicing their differential reinforcement. I know when my child tantrums at the store, I need to just look at other things, continue shopping. I shouldn't be saying, it's okay, maybe we'll buy it later. I need to just keep going on. Now, we as the clinicians are sitting there like, thumbs up, you're doing a great job. But what's everyone else around that parent doing?
Judging eyes.
Yeah, I mean, at best they're doing those like, oh, honey, I've been there too, maybe. But for the most part, they're, ooh, what's wrong with that parent? Why can't they control their child? They don't know the situation's going on, and they're not reinforcing the treatment adherence like we would like them to.
I had a very nice grandma come over to my crying child and be like, honey, what's wrong? Are you okay? Your child's crying. It's like, I know that he's crying.
Did you tell her? It's like, I'm a professional,
like,
please, back
off.
off.
I was just like, thank you.
So when we're working with families to establish adherence, we do need to be mindful of the fact that we have a lot of people around that parent that are probably not going to reinforce them with social praise the way that we will. So we kind of need to be aware of this, prepare them for that. We might even go so far as to say, what are the treatments that receive kind of the most scorn from society in general? Can we just sidestep those? Do we need to use extinction in our procedure? Could we just focus on maybe acquisition of some functional communication alternatives instead? Keeping these things in mind can go a really long way to making sure that when parents engage in treatment adherence, they receive the maximal amount of reinforcement from their environment, including people passing by and giving nasty looks.
Yeah. And the big part of that's going to be explaining that ahead of time, right? Like, if we think that this is going to be a challenge out in the community and we might see crying, how are you going to feel about that parent, right? And if they tell you this, I can't do this right now, great, then we know that and we can work on some other strategies at home before we attempt it, right?
Another piece that goes into our initial training and planning is going to be how can we improve stimulus generalization? So for the most part, just like all of us, when we're learning something new, we tend to do it in one setting with only certain stimuli around us. And then we're always surprised that the thing I could do in one setting, I can't necessarily do in another setting. And as behavior analysts, we understand, okay, I get what constant's going on. I understand what to do. Here's how I'm going to improve.
You're doing it wrong. It's train and hope.
Training, everyone, has anyone, raise show of hands, who's done train and hope and had great success? Someone in the, no. So we need to be aware of this. And we take this into account, I think, when we're in more like a clinical setting or we're in like our own school settings, but it's still relevant for families in the home and the community setting. Are we making sure that we train sufficient exemplars? Are we training across a wide range of problem behaviors? Or do we just pick the one that parents said, this is the most frustrating, and that's the only one we practiced, the only one we trained on? There were some studies that talked about in the article that looked at, well, what if we train general principles instead? So think about it. If instead of just training, here's how you'll deal with your child hitting their sibling, we talked more about the function of behavior. We talked more about some general ideas, like what are good rules of thumb, behavior analytically speaking, that should be reviewed, that could be relevant to lots of different target behaviors. Now, this might be a little more challenging, and certainly for some parents, if we start getting really into the weeds with what's the function of behavior, how might you determine the function, there's a good chance we're going to kind of lose some of the buy-in because we're going to start using terms that most people don't want to talk about.
You're going to get glazy eyes.
The glazy eyes, yeah.
The glazy dead eye. We've all seen it.
Yeah. So again, making sure you have sufficient exemplars is going to be important, however of those ways you choose to do so. You also might have a narrow range of setting stimuli. Think about our time. God bless any of you who work with families at home and put in for insurance, because I can't imagine that you are able to bill for as much of the time as you need to do as thorough a job as you know you have to do. Now,
you don't even need a show of hands on that.
You don't need a show of hands. I know that happens. I mean, it happens in Massachusetts. It happens here. It's going to happen here too. When we don't take the time, unfortunately, to train in either multiple settings or with multiple stimuli, we are kind of impeding our parents' ability to adhere to the treatment options. So some of it is just making sure that we, plan accordingly. We plan smartly. If we don't have unlimited time to go to every setting we need to, okay. Think about, general case analysis. What are the relevant stimuli in the various settings that we know the parent and child are going to be in? Let's just focus on those. We don't need to go to every single grocery store in the tri-state area. We just need to think, what are the relevant stimuli in the various grocery stores that kind of summarize what being in a grocery store is like? And you certainly could also do things like giving discriminative stimuli to the parents in the form of, say, like a note card or maybe like a self-monitoring form. In their pocket, they always have it, so that stimulus is always available no matter the setting, is a list of the steps to follow and responses in terms of whatever their child is doing. And as they do it, they can check it off or give themselves a point or whatever self-monitoring system you've worked with or you think the parent would like in the past. There was a study by Sanders et al. In '92 which sort of used that. Just here's a checklist, here's some basic practice in self-monitoring. They did do the work with the common social stimuli, and they found that parents really improved in their ability to adhere to training. And I believe actually did like that system, like having that kind of on hand, because the people who trained them are not going to always be available. When we talk also about stimulus generalization, we're also talking a little bit about weak rule following. And again, I wrote that slide and I'm looking back at it and saying, oh, that seems so pejorative to parents. Like, oh, parents can't follow rules. But I'll be honest, I'm sure all of us at one point had a family or a client or a school district or somebody we worked with, and in the back of our mind we're saying, what is wrong with this person? Why can't they just follow these simple rules I set out? They're basic behavioral principles.
I've said it to myself at like 2 a.m. Have you ever, when they're like, there's a child crying, and I'm like, I know I shouldn't do this, but I am. And they're in my bed now. So,
oh, yeah?
Right? Yeah.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
We all feel it. We're like, why can't they do it, but why can't we do it too?
Right. And rules are only going to work if the social reinforcement that you receive for those rules is stronger than the immediate environmental
Absolutely.
contingencies in
Yeah.
place, and that's not always the case.
No, and a lot of the rules that the average person knows are not going to be rules that I think line up perfectly with behavioral principles. So a lot of rules tend to have, feelings language in them. How many plans have you written that have lots of feelings language in them, everybody? A lot. We kind of shy away from the feelings talk. Or say talking about intrinsic versus extrinsic reinforcement. Some of the rules that we follow is if I work hard, then I'll achieve my goals and follow my dreams. That's operationally define that for me, please. But perhaps we should be thinking about sort of the general metaphor in that language and take some of what we know to be true about behavior and repackage it or phrase it in a way that is going to be in line with the typical kinds of rules that other adults are able to follow regularly, rather than trying to retrain every parent to be a behavior analyst. Which, some might be into that, but I'm sure a lot of them are not. I don't know if you guys... Some are, and some might be. That's true.
It's individually determined.
I feel like there was a good, I think it was last summer, I think it was Critchfield had a whole bunch of articles looking at, Google, what do people think of certain words? And any word that had anything to do with behavior analysis was, people really hated that word. Oh, that word made me feel gross. I don't like that word. And it's really sad to feel like everything you would talk to a parent about is kind of considered to be, unpleasant by the general populace. So I think that's kind of something for the whole field to keep in mind. And maybe we need to be thinking about, when we talk to each other in a room like this, we can be as precise as we want to, but, out there, our audience changes. We probably want to tone it down just a little bit. This next one, I think this is probably the easiest of all of them. If you thought the others were hard, this one I think is pretty simple. Strengthening response acquisition is really just a matter of using good training practices. And there's a ton of research to tell us what good training practices are going to be. Is there enough time in the day to do these good training practices? Some might say no, but that's a barrier that we have to work to overcome. When we're looking at the complexity of our programs, why can't we make our programs as simple as they need to be? Have we actually done a component analysis to determine that, nope, everything I wrote in my awesome plan, because I had my awesome FA, is totally needed, and without it, you forget it. You might as well fire me, because you need this awesome plan. Did we actually go to the trouble of saying which of those components were the most important, and therefore which ones need to be in the plan that we give to the parents? I don't want to do the show of hands again. We've kind of done that joke too many times. But I'm sure we're not always doing component analyses on every plan we write up for families. Could we just make our plans turn into a little bit more manageable chunks? Or, hey, what if we made sure to save the time to do some good old behavior skills training?
The training for you and me.
Yep, that's why I wrote it up there, yeah. I forgot about that. Can we just make a nice list of the steps?
The training
Can we
man's
model
training,
it for
really.
Can we model the steps for the parents? Can we give them feedback, both positive feedback, supportive feedback, as well as corrective feedback? And make sure that we keep practicing until they get it. As much as we all sort of want to say training ends when the person getting trained says, no, I think I got it, don't worry about it, I'm going to be fine. Have we seen them engage in all the steps of the training? The better we do with the training, again, the better chances that we see adherence. And then another one, and this is a simple one, I never even thought of this one. Where are we teaching our families? And I don't mean that stimulus generalization point. What's going on in the average household at any given time? The phone's ringing, maybe some chores need to be done, maybe a dog's barking. If you got multiple kids, they're probably fighting every single time you need to talk to somebody who you're paying quite a lot of money per hour to be there.
What are watching SpongeBob?
You could watch SpongeBob too. Maybe the parents are watching SpongeBob.
That's
it's a great show.
distracting.
It's a very distracting show. We need to be paying attention to our teaching environments. And if that means helping out with, hey, could our RBT that we have working with the family, could they just do a little bit of babysitting for a little while so mom and dad and the clinician could just go to a nice quiet place and just work on training for a little bit? I know I don't know if you can bill insurance for that part, but you can.
No.
I did not look up insurance fraud because I don't bill anyone for that. But you do need to be aware of that might need to be something that happens. And you want to eat the cost because
get creative.
Or get creative.
Right.
I don't know. I don't have any other creative ideas. That was the only one I came up with. Sorry. But can we be training in a really nice environment? And then finally, looking at consequent events. Of course, the problem, and it was nice they brought up that Skinner wrote that ABA technology competes poorly against naturally occurring contingencies, which is really sad. I don't know if any of you are listeners to the show, but we did a 2-part episode going over Murray Sidman's Coercion and its Fallout. If you have not read that, the main thesis of the book is that punishment is so easy to do, but it is not the best treatment in many cases. But again, it's really easy. So when we're looking at the competing contingencies, it's self-reinforcing.
Right, yeah.
But we have these competing contingencies of parents who are, just like all of us, they engage in the behavior that leads to the greatest magnitude, the most immediate delivery of reinforcement, and that has the least response effort. Our brand new behavior plan we're just sharing with parents who may not have any experience working in behavior with behavior analysts, that's not the least response effort. I don't care how easy you make your plan. It's never going to be the least response effort. So we do need to be, prepping parents for that. And then looking at simple ways to add reinforcement to that adherence. And it could be as easy as, have we built a good rapport with the family? Diana's going to talk about that looking at the Taylor article, so I'm not going to go too much into it. But again, do we show non-judgmental conversations? Do we show interest in what they and their family are doing? Are we empathetic, or are we just trying to get through our training as fast as possible so that we can go back and look at the graph afterwards?
Which is reinforcing.
That's reinforcing for us, but not necessarily for anybody else. Also, you could look at, say, I think I put it in my notes, it's like a swear jar type program. There were a couple studies looking at if the parents put a chunk of money aside, and then every time they go to training and they show mastery of a new skill, then they pay themselves some of that money. You might have a parent that says, I really want to have a system, can you help me? They might like that idea. I know if someone said, hey, Rob, do you want to do that as a system? My answer would be, of course, I do not want to do that. My money is my money.
Do you have to actually swear?
No.
No. But it's the idea of the swear jar. I mean, if the parents want help with swearing, you could work with that too.
Fund.
A rainy day fund.
Okay,
that sounds better. Exactly. So that kind of covers the part where we can do better in terms of overall trying to help parents with their treatments. Another area that we can always do better is in the describing what behavior analysis is. And that really gets into sort of the informed consent that we are both legally, ethically, and just in terms of best practice, want to make sure that our parents are able to give us. Now, for those of you who work in school systems, I know you've probably heard somebody say, they signed an IEP, therefore they gave us informed consent, we get to do whatever we want to do. I would beg to differ on that standpoint. Parents should understand what behavioral treatment is, not only because it's the ethical, legal, and just generally moral right thing to do, but also because we are going to be then asking them to engage in behavioral change with us. So we want to make sure they know what that means to start. So Helton and Albert Morgan put out 10 steps to making a parent guide. So for those of you who are sort of either newer to the field or just feel like you want a new way to describe what ABA is and how it's going to be relevant to family, here are 10 simple steps. It sounds like an internet clickbait article now.
Wait till you see what number 7 is.
For a low $19.95, you too can own the 10 steps to a parent guide.
So number 1 is going to be looking at how can we define and briefly describe ABA. Now the examples that the authors give as well, you could put the Cooper, Heron, and Heward definition on one side, and then you can write your own. ABA is a science where we, no, that's the Cooper one, sorry. The example would be, it's based on scientific research into how organisms respond to variables in the environment, and by changing those, we can create socially significant change, something like that. Make up your own example. That's just my crummy one.
Parents love it when you call their kid an organism.
I know, I was just going to say
Well, you guys are parents. I don't have to get that clever, I guess. Step 2, describe common ABA terms. And this is really just simple definition, simple example. How many of you have been in a conversation where reinforcement has been used incorrectly? Probably everybody here. I've used reinforcement incorrectly in a conversation.
You have.
I'll have to listen to the tape after. I may have used it wrong while I've been talking to you, and if so, apologies. But maybe discriminative stimulus, response, just some really basic terms. Step 3, what are the components that will be in the behavior intervention plan that I am developing for you to use with your child, with the client? That could be things like, what does ABC data mean? What are the general functions of behavior? And then kind of maybe a quick review of how you're going to use this information to build the plan later on. You also want to have things like, what do we expect to see in the plan? How long will this plan need to work? When will the plan be in place? All of these, again, get to some of the pieces that we just talked about in terms of changing some of the EOs when you're talking about later adherence.
I really like that one too, because I think that the treatment plans that I've seen don't really give like an end date, right? They're not like, it's like, we're just going to do this until it's done. And nobody really wants to hear that, right? Like, imagine if you're like gonna lose weight and like you pull up your app and it's like, can't wait for you to be done. you'll never be done. Right? You pay this app forever, every month, $29.95, right? So it's nice that when you can say, like, we're going to try this for 2 months. And if it's not working or we're not where we're going to be, we're going to change it, right? So I think that's nice, and it gives parents kind of an end point rather than you can reassess, because nobody wants to feel like they're doing something forever.
Yeah.
And it's not working.
Yeah.
And I think that comes out a lot of like mental health.
Yeah.
I don't want to bag on mental health professionals, but just sort of parent report. A lot of times, what parents have heard is like, my child has a this. They'll always have a this. There's nothing we can do about it, and that doesn't really get into the idea that we're all going to be able to improve a little bit every day if we put the right treatments in place.
I think a big focus of all of these initial steps here too is just like, let's set the stage for what we are doing here and set the tone for the relationship that we're starting with a new client, right? So if you're just like going in and throwing behavior plans around without any background,
With abandon.
Yes, I brought 20 copies. Then parents aren't going to have any idea about where you're coming from or why you're telling them to do this. And I know you guys are probably listening to this and saying, these are all great ideas. When are they supposed to be happening, right? Like, I am so busy. And I completely recognize that, and I think we've all been there too. So I don't want you to hopefully be off-put by that idea, but I think depending on where you work or what type of agency it is, like, maybe some of these pieces can be part of an intake process with a family or some introductory pieces too. Like, maybe you guys have a glossary or something that compares ABA terms to layman's definitions of those terms you can provide to families as kind of a starter situation too. There's nothing that can replace face-to-face time, of course, but I do recognize that this might seem overwhelming.
Yeah. So next couple steps, describe commonly used classroom strategies. Again, focusing on which ones you are expecting that you might be using for the client. So it's not just every classroom strategy ever, and you're not giving the parents a book. You're just giving them a very brief summary. So that could be things like, what's differential reinforcement? Describe a token economy. Maybe even something like incidental teaching would be good to go into this section. Step 5. Whoa, sorry.
What have you done?
I've broken it. I had one job. Step 5.
Get out of here.
I can't because the CE thing won't let me out. You want to provide definitions of data. Now, I kind of want to put this when I'm consulting to school-based teams. I would love to have a nice section on what is data, because I think data's broken through into the mainstream. We got to have data. Did you use data to make that decision? What data are you collecting? And people don't know what they're talking about. They're just throwing out a word. They don't know what data actually is.
R.
Yo, I don't even know. Okay, no, I think they're changing that somewhere.
What?
I did read that.
It was in a blog. I swear.
I am leaving.
I swear.
this
I
talk.
swear I saw it. Dana R.
Not happening.
Because, again, we're not going to collect every piece of data for all of our clients. There are certain ones that are more relevant than others. And I think it's good to inform parents what that will be. What does that look like? And how are we going to use that data? Those data. I'm doing the show alone. Step 6, a graph. Everyone should be using graphs. I hope you are all, I'm not going to show of hands again, but I hope everybody is putting their data in a graph that they can then show to people. I hope it's a nice, simple graph. I'm going to assume that that's totally happening. But we really want to make sure that parents understand what they should be seeing in a graph, because some parents might not have seen a graph since, high school calculus, and maybe that was not a fond memory for them. So we want to make sure that graph is nice, simple, and easily explained. Even in an intake kind of packet like this, the authors recommend, well, what if you put in the baseline you've been collecting, and then you draw a hypothetical, this is what we'd like to see. So how do we know our treatment is successful and is done? Well, here's this line, and then the line's up here. That's what we want to see in the graph. We're giving parents some nice targets to be looking for.
They're going to bring that, dude, just so you know. They're going to bring it to every meeting and be like, it's
the
not
graph?
there yet. It's not there yet.
And that's fine, because we've said other condition reinforcement. Look, it's up a little bit. It's on an increasing trend. That's the first step. All right. And then the last 4 steps, which honestly probably should have been like the first 4 steps, where you want to customize this. So for those of you who said, you know what, I'm going to make one of these and I like this idea, I'm going to make a nice parent guide, I'm going to give it to all my clients. Hold your horses. You got to make sure to individualize this plan, because if you don't, it's just going to be one more packet of things you throw at a parent, which they will not appreciate and is one more thing that they then have to read. You want it to be specific to their needs and the needs of the client you're currently working with. Some of it you can keep the same, but you want to make sure to individualize it. You also want to provide a list of common resources. Like we talked about, there are going to be barriers that we ourselves as BCBAs and clinicians cannot overcome. So what are places that parents could look for more support if needed? You want to create I don't know if number 9 is necessary, but a reference page for, number 9, an ABA terminology page, sorry. That one would be necessary, kind of a glossary at the end to sort of sum up what the parents are seeing. And then number 10, add a table of contents. Sure, put a nice cover on it, I guess.
They wanted there to be 10 steps. Need to be 10 steps.
They were getting tired by the end of that one. They just kind of, an eye-catching cover and one of those, sheet protectors. So...
And laminated.
Yeah, and like Diana was saying, do we have time to make all these guides? Okay, well, no, I know we don't have time to do any of the things that we need to do. So here's one more thing that we need to find the time to do is make sure that the parents get to see this. We don't just give it to them and say, read this at some point and maybe I'll quiz you on it later. We have to go over it with them, because if we don't, it's just, again, one more thing. Those of you who work in schools, you know how much paperwork the parents get sent home as part of the special education process. It's enormous. They even have forms. I don't know if it's the same here in Missouri, but they have a form in Massachusetts where parents can sign off, please don't give me any more copies of this form, I don't want it anymore. I have heard the joke, I've wallpapered a bathroom with these forms so many times at meetings by now. And I'm sure it's true in some cases. So sit down, go over it, review the parts that are most individualized, because those are the parts the parents care the most about. You want to make sure that you're clear about the definitions, what are the data going to tell you, and then make sure to ask for feedback. And then that leads us into the idea of compassionate care that Diana is going to talk about. I'm going to skip on that so we have enough time.
Oh, thank you.
Everything but compassionate care over here.
All right, so this section is, like I told you guys before, this is one of my favorite articles, and I'm now trying to incorporate it into like every talk that I give, I think. I've done a pretty good job recently. But it's fairly recent, so Taylor, LeBlanc, and Nozick in 2018 wanted to address within the field of behavior analysis, how well are we doing at providing what they term, and others have termed, compassionate care. And what they're really looking at here is therapists' empathy skills and interpersonal skills. And, if you guys are behavior analysts, you can reflect on your own experiences in grad school. And chances are these types of skills weren't highlighted during your time. Now, you learned a lot of stuff, and it was all aligned to the task list, so that was all great. But currently, we don't have anything within our task list that looks at specifically how are we relating to families, how are we addressing cultural competence as well, and I think those are really important areas. So we do know that these types of interpersonal skills and empathetic skills are really highly valued by families, and other research has looked at how well they're correlated with other types of client outcome measures, such as we see increased patient satisfaction, increased treatment adherence, higher quality parental interviews, and improved clinical outcomes when the therapist is perceived as empathetic and or having more advanced interpersonal skills, so soft skills, right? It's fine. So they go into a definition of compassion and talk about really how we can separate out that definition of compassion from the terms sympathy and empathy. They are obviously related, but they're a little bit different. So sympathy is generally defined as like feeling sorry for someone else or someone else's situation. And then empathy is taking another person's perspective in this situation. So, when you walk a mile in their shoes type thing. Excuse me. So to engage in empathy, one would need to recognize how someone else is feeling. So identify the emotion of another person. Sometimes we term that perspective taking in our field. And then also sort of recognize how they're feeling and then their emotional response in that scenario. So both of those are good things, right? Sympathy is good, empathy is even better. And then we can really define compassion by saying we're going to take empathy to the next level by taking action to benefit our client in the context of an empathetic response to the situation that they're currently experiencing. So the goal here, if we're providing compassionate care, is to come at it from this empathetic perspective, think about what the client is experiencing, including, when I say client, I mean the family. And our goal should be to alleviate the suffering of that family. Now that may be certainly to make the child's challenging behavior that we're seeing better, but there are other ways as well that we can be interacting with this family and supporting them, and we want to be thinking, I think, more broadly about that as well. Yeah, that's good. So what they did a survey of 95 caregivers or parents of children with autism, and they asked them several different questions. They had them rate the response on a 1 to 5 Likert scale. How well does your BCBA do X thing? I'm gonna need to read that, and I may have to get a little bit closer.
Oh, that's fine.
In order to see it.
We're the married ones. Yes.
Hey. Sorry, guys. Okay. And I know you guys can't see this either, and it's too small, and I knew that ahead of time. But
Look
I
in your
wanted
bags. We've included opera glasses for
Look
everybody.
under your chair, everyone. No, sorry. But I'm just going to tell you what they all say. But I kind of wanted to give you not just the ones that I think are concerning, but so you can sort of see out of the total number of questions, the ones that are highlighted blue are the ones I'm going to be reviewing for you guys, so you get a feel for where we, at least for the 95 people that were surveyed, where we as behavior analysts are not doing so hot.
Doesn't look really great right now.
It's not looking super great.
There's a lot of blue.
Yeah. So there are 3 of these graphs. The first one here is how well the BCBA did with listening and collaboration related to the parent.
You think we do
Okay.
a good job at that? I was surprised. I was like, I do a good job at that.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I look at this,
This isn't me.
right?
They don't know me.
This isn't about me.
It's a different behavior
All right.
analyst.
So the ones that are highlighted blue. So I chose to highlight the ones that are blue, where the parents gave us less than 80%. Okay? I don't think I said that super well. Less than 80% of parents agreed with the statement. There we go. That's how I meant to say it, right? So very often in our field, we consider 80% to be like the minimum for mastery.
We've got it.
Right?
Right?
Okay?
Across
So these are the ones in which
sessions.
we are not meeting mastery. And again, these are related specifically to listening and collaboration skills. So I'm just going to tell you what they say. The behavior analyst regularly asks me if I am happy with how things are going with my child. Only 61% agreed. The behavior analyst
Compromises.
compromises with me when we do not agree. Only 59% agreed. The behavior analyst clarifies roles and expectations, both theirs and the parents. That was like 65% agreed. The behavior analyst regularly communicates and follows up with me about recent changes to programs. 68% agreed.
That's a rough one, considering we're expecting parents to follow all the things we tell them to do, and we're not actually then checking if they did. Well, in these cases.
Yeah. The behavior analyst collaborates and communicates with other members of my child's treatment team. So like the school, other therapists, there was a 71% agreement on that statement.
We're almost there.
The behavior analyst is effective at identifying skills and reducing behavior that meet my family's needs. That was only a 71%, and that's sort of like our job.
Yeah, that's our job. Don't feel as good about that one.
When I have concerns about my child's program, the behavior analyst actively listens to my concerns without being defensive. That was only 76%.
Who took this survey?
The behavior analyst makes me feel like a valued member of my child's treatment team. 75% agreed, but that means that 25% did not. The behavior analyst considers my concerns and collaborates with me when developing problem behavior intervention plans. We had a 78% on that.
We're almost there.
And then the behavior analyst considers the input of my child when appropriate. And we got a 78% on that one as well. Okay? So there is some work to be done in that regard, right? Now, that's not to say that all behavior analysts have this challenge, because many of the parents said that these things were fine, they were going okay. But if 1 out of 5 parents feel that this wasn't being met, right, and these are precisely these type of soft listening skills that we need in order to create an empathetic relationship with families, then that's 20% of the parents that we're serving that aren't experiencing optimal care. And that, to me, is concerning. They also asked them, how well does your BCBA convey empathy and compassion? So the previous one was listening skills, this one's empathy skills, okay? And it's set up the same way, so ones that are below 80% are highlighted, and I will tell you what they say. The behavior analyst regularly asks how I am doing. Only 53% said that was happening.
Basic, right? Hi, how are you doing? Just did it.
There's no time. We've got so many treatment plans to get through today.
I brought 20 copies. The behavior analyst acknowledges his or her own mistakes. 55%.
I mean, did they ask if there actually were any mistakes to acknowledge, though? We are pretty
okay.
good.
Fair enough. Behavior analyst, oh my gosh, cares about including all of my children, so children who are perhaps not the target child for the intervention. Only 51% noted that. Behavior analyst reassures me that things will get better. 65% said that was happening. The behavior analyst acknowledges when treatment is not working. Only 65% of the parents felt that was happening.
Okay.
I didn't know if you were going to comment. Yeah, I know.
Just make a face.
I know, yeah. The behavior analyst seems to have an understanding of what it's like for me to have a child with autism. Only 68% agreed with that. And to be fair, not all behavior analysts have children with autism. But I think even if a parent could hear that we are empathetic to that, right, could go a long way. The behavior analyst understands when I have challenges implementing protocols. 69% agreed, which means 30% did not, which is pretty much what we've been talking about today, right? If parents are having a hard time, how can we help them versus blame them for not adhering to treatment?
Blame louder. No, wait. I should have listened to my section.
Nope, you're wrong. I lost my place, y'all.
There's patient. The behavior analyst is patient with me when training to implement protocols.
That was 68%. Behavior analysts seem to understand my fears and anxiety about my child's future. Only 69%. Behavior analyst understands when I struggle with parenting my child. 72%. Behavior analyst understands how having a child with autism impacts our family dynamics. Only 72%. That to me is a really big one. The behavior analyst acknowledges my feelings when discussing difficult or challenging circumstances. 72%. That's like the definition of empathy. The behavior analyst respects my cultural values and beliefs, 67%. Behavior analyst is compassionate and non-judgmental, that's a 72%, and the behavior analyst cares about my capacity to parent my child, which is 70%. So a lot of these you can see are overlapping concerns, but they are precisely the types of things that parents pick up on if we're not taking the time to sit down and have these conversations with them, ask them how they're doing, acknowledge that this is hard, what they're trying to do is hard, right? And just sit with them for a little bit. We're so quick, I know I am, to just jump to the solution, right? Like we're behavior analysts, we're like, I understand the problem, I know exactly what's going on here, and I can fix it for you. And sometimes that's helpful, but sometimes that's not what parents need right now, and some of it's just sitting and hearing what they have to say, and getting that rapport established and that buy-in with parents so that then when you come to them and say, I have an idea, it's going to be a hard thing, but we're going to do this hard thing together, you're a lot more likely to get the buy-in from them to have that really happen. Yeah. And then last one, this one is in the flip side. So this one, if you agreed, I'm going to say it all backwards, sorry. If you agreed, that was indicative of poorer performance, okay? So these are the ones I highlighted if it was above 20% in order to have it be the same.
Sure.
Did the math work out there? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So in this section, they ask parents what are some items that may contribute to problems in the therapeutic relationship. And this slide we did a little bit better using the criterion that I established, but there were still some that were concerned. So they said the behavior analyst seems to have his or her own agenda about the direction of my child's program. So 24% felt like that was a problem, which means that they most likely weren't being consulted. The parents weren't being consulted on what should be included in the program. The behavior analyst underestimates my child's ability. 21% had that concern. The behavior analyst failed to communicate with me. 19% had that concern. And the behavior analyst has an authoritarian demeanor rather than a collaborative one. 21%. So, sorry, that was a bit of a downer.
You should have done those first and then sort of, oh well.
I know. Well, I think that these are really important. And this is recent data, right? This was just published last year. So this is not as though it's, we've come so far since then. And it is a relatively small sample size as well. It's only 95 parents, but that is almost 100. So,
In case you guys didn't know.
I know, I'm so good at math. I'm doing so good.
Stop telling them in an authoritarian manner what the math is.
Right, but I just really wanted you guys to sort of sit with those numbers for a little while, and I don't have a solution to this problem right now, but I think the more we talk about it, the more it highlights it as a concern for us, and that's the beginning of a change.
So just like if you've listened to our show, we always like to end with some kind of summary point, something that you can take home. It's been an hour and almost 15 minutes, so we've gone through a lot of things. So what are some of the key points that you might want to remember? We call this the dissemination station. Again, if you've listened to the show, we know we have some fabulous sound effects when we get to this section of the show. We're going to show you live how we make those effects occur. Are you ready? Here we go. There it is, ladies and gentlemen.
There
Thank
it
you.
is.
That's it. Costs a lot of money for that. Oh, you can apply that. All right, some key points to improving adherence. So I think probably some of the low-hanging fruit in terms of changes you can make today are how are we speaking to the parents that we work with? Just going through that list of things that parents felt weren't being done as well, showing a little bit more empathy, asking about how the family is doing, taking the time to listen to their concerns. These are all things that I'm sure we're all capable of doing and even think about sometimes. We just need to put in a little more planning into when can we fit that in to make sure it is happening all the time.
Maybe we have our own self-monitoring checklist in our pockets. Did we say hello? Did we make eye contact? Did we say, how are you doing today?
Did we blame
How was your
parents when
weekend?
adherence didn't occur?
Right.
But you don't want that on your self-monitoring sheet.
Yeah.
Are we making sure that we're practicing all of the skills we're expecting parents to follow through with across multiple environments? Is there anything about our treatments that we could do to reduce their overall complexity? Have we gone to the trouble of becoming conditioned reinforcers for the family?
Party dancers. That's what I was gonna say.
And certainly, I tell this to teachers when they tell me, of course I give my students a lot of attention. I'm constantly telling them, why aren't you doing your work? Could you keep doing your work? Becoming a conditioned reinforcer is more about responding to what the parent is doing, showing an active interest in what they're talking about, rather than just making statements about all the attention I give them and telling them, have you followed the treatment? Did you put down the data I need for my awesome graph that I'm not going to show you? It's just for me. It's my reinforcer.
You hold the computer away, you're like,
don't look, it's mine.
You don't need this.
I'll show you when it's ready. And, are there things that we've done to, say, leverage technology? We didn't get into that too much, but I think as a field, we're getting a little bit better every year at using technology. But I'm always kind of surprised at how many technologies are out there that could help us with a few of these problems, specifically related to training, that we kind of don't use. We still kind of go to the paper, pencil, and what we can see in front of us sometimes. So, being creative about how we can overcome some of these barriers ourselves, because these are things we should be doing, and saying it's too hard isn't really a fair option anymore. We have to come up with some real solutions.
Yeah, and I think that all of these things that we're talking about are important.
Because we talked about them.
Because we talked about. No, just kidding. But to tie it back around, we don't know if these things reduce parent stress, right? That research
Sorry, guys.
that we have, as far as I have uncovered, hasn't happened yet. So this area is huge and widely open regarding future research, right? And I think that it's an important area as our field hopefully moves towards more compassionate care.
Mm-hmm. Well, we are, we did it almost exactly in time. Hooray. If folks have questions, we'll be around. We have a little booth over on the side, too, if people want to come over and give us any feedback on their own. We want to thank the Thompson Center for having us talk to you, and we want to thank all of you for being such an attentive audience, and we hope you enjoyed the presentation and our talk. So thank you all very much.
Bye.
Bye. I didn't do the catchphrase. So. We hope you enjoyed our live recording from the Thompson Center for Autism Conference. It is a fabulous conference. We always enjoy going. The 2 times we've went, at least, it's been a ton of fun. We want to thank everyone at the Thompson Center for having us come out to work with them and to present. It was really a treat, and it was really, really great for all of you who came up and said hello or came over to us to ask about what it was we were doing there, and we got to tell them.
What are you doing here?
Oh boy. Before we break for the evening, I want to make sure to give you that second secret code word, which you're going to want, because remember, this CE is on us. It's for you.
FREE.
That's right. And that second code word is Snickers. SNICKERS. Snickers, the candy bar, like a full-size candy bar.
Full size.
Which you could totally get if you had gone to the conference, because, man, that's one of the snacks. Oh, yeah. If you thought seeing us was fun, oh boy. Candy bars might be more fun. Snickers. Well, that brings us to the end of our live episode. We want to thank everyone at the Thompson Center one more time. We also want to make sure to thank you, the listeners, for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please think about subscribing to us on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us everywhere on social media as ABA Inside Track. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, Pinterest, we're on Instagram, we're on YouTube with the subtitling features enabled for all of our episodes we post there. You can also go to the website, abainsidetrack.com, and email us at abainsidetrack@gmail.com. We'll be back next week with another full-length episode, but until then, keep responding. Bye!
Bye-bye.